I'm Matt Dixon, and welcome to the Purple Patch Podcast. The mission of Purple Patch is to empower and educate every human being to reach their athletic potential. Through the lens of athletic potential, you reach your human potential. The purpose of this podcast is to help time-starved people everywhere integrate sport into life. And welcome to the Purple Patch Podcast. As ever, your host, Matt Dixon. And today we are on part 2 of our coaches' conversations with Scott Tindal. Scott is the co-founder of Fuelin, one of the preeminent influencers in how athletes are fueling and hydrating their races across all endurance sports. And Scott is pretty much a regular on the show now. And today we're going to get back down to basics a little bit because we're ending the year and we're all looking forward, looking to up-level over the course of the coming year. And I thought it would be fun to have Scott's perspective across 3 main areas. Number 1, if you're an athlete seeking to up-level your performance, what can you be doing right now to lay the foundation as it relates to eating and, as you'll find out, sleeping as well? The second category I want to jump into is to gain Scott's advice and some simple application on what you should do if you are really focused on improving your body composition. Some of the ABCs of that. And it turns out that you've got a lot of control on how to improve that area. And then finally, what is Scott's perspective as it relates to longevity, making sure you're setting yourself up for the best quality of life for the years ahead. We stray outside of the nutrition there. We talk about movement, sleep, stress reduction, and some key habits around both your eating and your daily hydration. It's fun-packed, it's a coach's conversation, and it's really insightful. I think you're going to enjoy it. And so without further ado, I'm going to give you Scott Tindal. But one small note as well. If you want to find out more about Fuelin, simply head to fuelin.com/purplepatch. The team are always ready to reach out and help with any of your needs. You can also find all of the information on Purple Patch programming at purplepatchfitness.com. And if you want to have a direct connect to the team at Fuelin, or if you want to reach out to us directly and extend the conversation, simply ping us an email, info@purplepatchfitness.com. We'll be delighted to set up a complimentary consultation. But without further ado, I give you Scott Tindal. It is time for the meat and potatoes. It is the meat and potatoes. So here's a question for you. Are you an athlete that is looking ahead to next year and thinking, I want to take my performance to the next level? Or perhaps you're someone that really wants to improve your body composition. Or further still, are you someone that wants to build a platform of daily energy, where you want to set yourself up for a high quality of life for the years ahead? If you're any one of those people, or perhaps all 3, and then this is the show for you. Because I've welcomed back my guest, I would call him my master guest because he's been on the show so much now, Scott Tindal from Fuelin. Welcome, Scotty.
Matty,
Good to see you again.
Thanks,
last week we had a nice chat about Kona and some broader perspectives on triathlon. Now we're going to expand our horizons a little bit, and I want to have some common advice as we start to enter into the end of the year. And most people are looking ahead. They're getting ready to commit to their New Year's resolutions and all of that stuff. But I want to get some general advice for you. And I'm going to go just very simply with 3 questions of what should we focus on if you're an athlete, if you're looking for body composition changes, if you're looking for improving your longevity and daily quality of life, and what you bring to your role or anything that's important to you. Very, very simple stuff, really practical guidance and advice. And I will say before we dive into this, we talked a lot in last week's show about fueling. We talked a lot about athletics, race fueling, some observations around Kona. If you guys missed that show, I really recommend you go back. It was a treasure trove of perspective and really interesting insights. Today, we're going to get a little bit more practical and really rip the meat off the bone, as it were. And I want to start with talking about the athlete first. And let's let most athletes at this phase of the year are in what we call off-season. So it's far away in the horizon that their race goals and their start lines are there. Training demands are much lower. Specificity is actually probably lower so far as not really training race specificity right now. They're doing a lot of foundational work. So, as a nutritionist, what would be your recommendation for athletes thinking about charting their journey for higher performance? What should they be focusing on right now in terms of eating, fueling, supporting training demands, hydration? How should an athlete think about it? Because most of them stop thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And actually, probably for all three problems that you described at the start, my answer would probably be very similar, actually, but we can get into the nitty gritty of that. I mean, firstly, I think reflect on what's happened in the season past.
Yeah.
With either yourself or with your coach or with your team around you and say, well, where did we do well? Where did we not go well? Take the Arnie Schwarzenegger approach. Cut your pants off at the knees so you can see your calves at every opportunity and say, well, this is my weakness. How am I going to develop that weakness to become a strength? And so, okay, you're that athlete who wants high performance. Where was the high performance missing? And where are you going to direct your efforts to that? Maybe you weren't strong enough. Okay. So what does the big picture of the macro cycle of the next 12 months look like? What's the overarching goal for that? And that's, going to be a discussion. And then obviously specifically, how does nutrition fit with that? If you need to build muscle because you're a bit weaker, then your calorie intake is going to be really important. You have to be in a caloric surplus. You have to be manipulating your protein and certainly your carbohydrates around your training to maximize the impact of that.
So I just want to pause that because I think that's really important. If general weakness is an area to attack and you want to build strength, it's not just about going to the gym. It's not just about training. There is a nutritional component that is critical. You need to be in a surplus. So I want to double underline that. So just explain what that is. And then when you say manipulating protein, what do you mean by that in a practical sense?
Yeah, I mean, and again, even from a training perspective, I would counter that and say it's not just about lifting weights. It's lifting weights with a purpose.
Yes.
It's with an intensity. It's with a focus. So, if you want to have hypertrophy, there's a certain rep range, there's a certain set range, there's a certain rest period that you need to be focusing on. And everyone's so worried, I'm going to get bulky. It's like, oh, come on. Even if you did get a bit bulky, is that going to be the worst thing for you at the start of the off season? Probably, every triathlete or endurance athlete throughout the year is most likely, as you highlighted last week, I've shrunk.
It's shrinking,
You will most likely either maintain your lean mass or probably potentially lose a little bit as the season goes on. So don't be too paranoid about that. Look, in terms of structuring, overall calorie intake is probably the most important thing. Overall protein intake in terms of across the 24 hours and the weeks and the months is going to be super important. Same with carbohydrate intake. Positioning it around your training, yes, it's important. It's probably not the most important thing, not nearly as important as with endurance training. That's pretty clear from what we're seeing. The duration of the training sessions, for most lifting sessions, you're not going to need to eat anything during those sessions.
The session,
Certainly taking in something before, thinking about that, not going in fasted. Again, it's not equivocal. It doesn't mean everyone will benefit from eating something going into training. However, the research supports, and certainly there's a correlation, if you do eat before a strength session, and this is certainly our philosophy at Fuelin, eat something before, don't go in fasted, more likely you'll push more weight and you'll do more repetitions. What does that equate to? Probably better results. Afterwards, making sure you're not, don't do intermittent fasting in and around strength training if you want to, again, increase strength and power. And size, because if you neglect your body of fuel, protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and obviously that's total calories, then you won't get the results you need. So I think having a plan around a plan, you've got your training plan, you should have a nutrition plan. And I think, again, I say this time and time again, I always laugh, off-season, pre-season, whatever you want to call it. Oh, I don't need a nutrition plan. Well, are you going to eat? Isn't it easier to not have to think about the way in which you're eating and just follow a plan, much like you would with a training plan? surely that's just an easier way. We've got a lot going on in our lives. Reduce the guesswork, eliminate the decision paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
Just get on with it. What's the one thing I'll say, and I was talking to Jonathan, co-founder, about this, and I always go back to it. It's like everyone wants this sexy approach to like everything. And it's like, eat well, eat with purpose, train well, train with purpose, sleep well, sleep with purpose. Like,
Habit development. Yeah.
It's just not that cool.
Yeah.
And it takes effort.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be consistent with it to get the results. But when we see athletes do all those three things really well, you know what happens? They have great results.
They improve. Yeah, it's true. I want to broaden your horizon a little bit outside of. We went down the rabbit hole of strength and building muscle. About a year ago, we had a conversation. You said something really interesting for the athlete right now. You just talked about there's so much stuff to be thinking about in the middle of the season when an athlete is training for a race. In the midst, by the way, because most of our listeners are time-starved amateurs, of life carrying on. They have this looming deadline. Training is at its highest intensity. They have almost no time, and they're trying to crack the code of race fueling. We now remove that, training a little bit less, a little less specificity on the training, at least as far as the race specificity. It's a great time. A year ago, you talked about this is the time that you want to build the great platform of really high quality eating. Can you explain that concept a little bit? Like in off season, you want to get your daily eating dialed in when your caloric demands are a little bit lower. So just break that down, because I thought that was a real sort of unlock for many of our athletes last year. They're like, I see.
Yeah, I think a lot of athletes don't eat well. Well, a lot of people don't eat well. I think you've only got to look at the state of the world at the moment, whether it be the USA, Australia, or the UK, or globally. So I think, what does that mean? I think, again, bring it back into simple terms. Yeah, aiming 6 to 9 serves of vegetables a day.
There you go. Tons of vegetables.
No one's doing it. No one's doing it. Look, I struggle to do it.
It's practically very challenging.
It is challenging. Yeah. Certainly can get to 6. Lunch and dinner.
Yep.
Can certainly just bulk out the plate with 6 serves of veggies. Breakfast, if it is a cooked breakfast, throwing in extra couple of handfuls of, this morning, a couple of handfuls of spinach, spring greens and whatnot. So that certainly increases fiber intake. Everyone talks about gut health. How do you improve gut health? It's not through probiotics. Even the research around probiotics is pretty scant these days in terms of showing clear evidence of effect. What seems to be showing effect is prebiotics. Prebiotics being fiber, certainly insoluble, soluble fiber, which the gut microbiome feeds on. That's what it thrives on. Where do you get fiber from? You get it from vegetables. Even the research on fiber, like inulin, found in all these products, is a little bit iffy. So powdered sort of fiber sources maybe don't do, even though they say fiber, maybe they're not doing exactly what real fiber does.
Real fiber.
Like real food.
Yeah, that's the solution.
Eat food.
Don't take a powder. Eat food. Tons of fiber.
Eat real food, yeah.
So come to it. That's number one, fiber. Anyway.
Fiber, fruit, vegetables. Two pieces of fruit a day. Don't be scared of fruit. Yeah. As I always say, no one got fat eating fruit. So
fruit, one of my favorite quotes as well. So there's fruit. There's number one. Bedrock it. Boil it down. Fruit super simple.
Yeah, fruit and veggies. I think that's your mainstay. Now, that will provide great micronutrition. There is obviously some macronutrition within that in terms of carbohydrates. Certainly leafy greens and those types of vegetables aren't going to contain a lot of carbohydrates. So you need to layer on top. But you can still choose other vegetables. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, parsnips, root vegetables, beets.
Good.
Layer those on top based on what you require. Now, if you need more carbohydrates than that, again, choose sources. Whole wheat breads, good quality breads, sourdoughs, brown rices.
And a lot of that is dependent on your caloric expenditure for life and training, yeah?
And again, if you're thinking of that second athlete who is maybe trying to improve body composition, yes, calories matter.
Yep. We're going to get onto that. What about protein? Because what we're doing is laying the foundation. So we've got all these, we've got fibers, etc. Then you've got this throttling effect of, let's call it the more starchy carbohydrates. You want to choose good quality ones, and that's dependent. So that you want to think about that as a lever almost, where you or a throttle. You throttle up the carbs as your caloric expenditure comes. What about proteins and fats? People are very interested in that.
Yep. And even just before that, so, visually, when you're looking at either your plate, is 3/4 of your plate filled with vegetables?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a good place to
That's a
start.
good place to start.
At least, 2 to 3 fists of vegetables as well, if you whichever visualization you want. So I think that's a really good place to start. How much of my plate is filled with, fruits and vegetables is a good place. Then protein. I think protein's a really good place to start, again, from a foundational perspective, because you might be on low calorie or lower calorie intake, again, to try and improve body composition, but you can still take in moderate to high amounts of protein, which is still part of that calorie puzzle. So, and doing that, not only you'll probably increase satiation, so your feelings of fullness, which prevents you hopefully snacking and then taking in extra calories, if that is, again, your goal. You are hopefully improving immune function by taking in higher amounts of protein, which is going to be essential because, on a lower calorie intake, there is the potential for susceptibility to upper respiratory tract infections and whatnot if you're continuously in a caloric deficit as a result of maybe too much training and things. So, and again, male to female differences. Males may be a little bit more robust in terms of their ability to withstand that versus females. Again, not going to get into the weeds of why that is. It's just what we observe. Protein for building lean mass, essential. For retaining lean mass, essential. For bone health, essential. You hear tales of increased protein intake, it causes leaching of calcium from bones. Actually, that's not the truth. Look at the research. The research shows actually those individuals who take in more protein tend to have better bone mineral density. So again, from a habit perspective, taking in and plant protein, fine. The difference, again, it used to be, plant protein is inferior to animal protein. Actually, it's not really supported by the research these days. As long as you're getting the equivalent of total protein from plant sources as animal. Now, in order to
which is more of a challenge.
To get the plant protein means you've got to eat a hell of a lot more. And often with plant protein sources, well, what do they come with? They come with more fat and in particular, more carbohydrates, which now makes it difficult if you're trying to keep total calories down. So that's where the plant diet becomes more of not a struggle, but more of a puzzle, and certainly requires more planning in order to do it well. Because you can be a plant-based athlete and eat terribly. You can eat margarita pizzas. You can eat Doritos. You can drink Coke, and you can eat all the white bread in the world. You're a vegan athlete. Congratulations. You also eat like crap. So
exactly.
Again, foundational good quality food, whether you're plant-based or whether you're animal-based, thinking about the quality, thinking about then how does my calorie intake work with that, and then what am I trying to achieve?
So on a simple thing, you said a nice sort of visualization of 3/4 of the plate or 2 fists of vegetables. Is there any algorithm or rule of thumb so far as just general people? What should they be consuming on a day-to-day basis with protein?
So hand of protein's a nice little sort of
a hand of
thinking
protein
full hand, and
in every meal that they consume.
I think. I mean, again, total size of the athlete now is
of course, but it's a good
what you weigh in pounds.
Consuming protein.
Consuming protein in grams per day. That's a nice little look. That's somewhere between 2 and 3 grams per kilo.
Exactly. So I weigh just under 200 pounds. So therefore, I'm aiming
somewhere
150 to 200, 175.
Definitely above 150. Yeah. If you're, what do you say? You're 200 pounds.
100. Well, I wouldn't like to say that much. No, more like 193. But let's go towards.
So 190 to 210.
Yeah,
is your range.
Okay.
Again, think of ranges. I think everyone's like, ooh, obviously we give a target for someone. So 180 grams for me, 200 grams for you. It's a target. If you get either side of that 20 grams, let's call it 10%, you're doing well. You're never going to nail exactly. And I think, again, like athletes, I get messages from some athletes, and obviously we work with a type A personality, I think, and with triathletes, and I missed it by 5 grams.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
dude, like, not only is tracking, like, there's going to be some degree of error in tracking, whether it's your visual, what you're doing from a weighing perspective, from the back of the label that isn't 100% accurate. Trends are important. So yes, hand of protein. The hand of protein should weigh roughly 200 grams, which is what, 7 ounces?
Yep.
Something like that. Thickness of a deck of cards.
Go.
Something like that on your plate. Okay, give or take, depending on how big your hand is, maybe weigh it the first time, chicken breast, one. But again, visualizing on your plate. So big piece of protein, plant or animal, lots of veggies, some fruit on there, starchy carbs are layered in based on what you need.
Okay. And then just typically the fat just take care of itself through the protein sources.
Look, if you are an omnivore and you consume animal protein, there's a good chance a lot of fat will be contained in there. Now, again, you can add good quality fats. So olive oils, avocado oils, avocado, olives, omega-3s through, if you think of the SMASH acronym. Do you know that? Do you know the SMASH acronym?
No, I'm not sure if I do, actually.
Sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, herring. Best sources of omega-3s.
That's there's another phrase of that actually, which is called hell on earth.
I love my omega-3s.
Actually, I like my sardines.
So I recommend these a lot. Fantastic sources of fats in terms of omega-3s. Fantastic source of protein. Include them. Do you want to swallow a pill every day or several pills to get your omega-3 intake, or can you start consuming one of those 5 types of oily fish in your daily consumption? And I say to people, like, try and eat fish once a day. And they're like, whoa, I can't eat fish once a day. And I'm like, well, you got 3 meals in the day. Like, why can't you? And then actually, if they start to build it into their habit, whether it's breakfast with some smoked salmon, some sardines, some tinned salmon, some smoked mackerel, some pickled herring. Okay, well, there was 5 options for 5 different things for breakfast. Maybe you could do that in lunch. Obviously, don't want to be that co-worker who brings in tinned fish. I got told this by Mel, my partner. She's like, I went into a co-working space and she's like, I said, oh, I'm going to pack my lunch because that's what I do. But she's like, I packed some sardines and that, and she just took them out and she went, don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. So probably if you do work in an office space, breakfast or dinner at home with your smelly fish, but you can certainly bring it into your habit formation, your daily nutrition intake, eating more fish. I think it's a wonderful thing to include in your dietary intake. So that would be another habit that I would certainly, start to instill from a food perspective. Where do you get your omega-3s from? You can get a lot of it from fish if you stick to those 5 fish in the SMASH acronym.
How about beyond the athlete? And I guess to finish the athlete, with these foundational habits, if you really start to build in a really good platform of health, as training demands go up, is it a nice rule of thumb? I know it's not the bullseye, that as your training demands go up and you start hitting more intensity, more hours, basically then you're layering on top of these habits. So these habits never change. No. That's your foundation of eating. That's just good quality of eating. And then the throttle is really adding calories on top of it with probably a higher ratio of carbohydrates. Is that a nice rule of thumb for people?
Exactly. And that's exactly how we do it to keep it simple at Fuelin. So high to moderate protein. Your fat tends to look after itself. Additional fats in, as we discussed, as required. Base of good quality carbohydrates and fiber and whatnot, and then layering in. So it goes from a red meal, as we would describe it, lower carbohydrate, to a yellow meal, which you've layered in some carbohydrates on top of the vegetables.
On top of the vegetables.
That could be a piece of toast for breakfast. Okay, that's another, 2 pieces of toast going to give you, 30 grams of carbs. Great. Lunch. cupped hand of, a cup of cooked brown rice.
Yep.
Lay it in. Dinner could be some quinoa, couscous, could be rice, it could be pasta, but it's just layering on top of your foundation. And that's the simple thing. It goes from a red meal to a yellow, and from a yellow to a green, which again, every athlete loves to see some green on their plan. It doesn't mean green is pasta only. It doesn't mean green is pizza only. You've got all these wonderful grains that you can choose from these days that, you walk into any supermarket and before, I mean, you only had rice or pasta. Now you've got couscous, quinoa, farro, amaranth. You've got all these different grains that you can explore, and they will provide you with great quality carbohydrates, lots of carbohydrates, fiber as required. Obviously, you can reduce fiber in and around heavy training sessions and races. But on a daily basis, taking in large amounts of volume is going to help you with gut health. And that's important. It's going to help you. Everyone's searching for this. The average person takes in less than 15 grams of fiber per day. The recommended amount, somewhere between 35 and 45 grams of fiber. How do you get that? Good quality food.
So I think if we extract all of it, and I'll go into coach mode and just hopefully as a listener, just remember this, which is I think the biggest mistake that I see is that athletes, particularly because we're focused on athletes right now, think about healthy eating, and then there is a light switch, almost like it's the other side of the moon, the dark side of the moon of now I'm training, it's just carbs, carbs, carbs. So it's pizzas, it's fries, it's potatoes, get the calories in. If you can just shift your relationship with that and think, no matter what is occurring, healthy eating, the bedrock, those vegetables you talked about, tons of fiber, appropriate proteins, and then you layer on top of this foundation, that's why it's called a foundation, the additional carbohydrates from the world of sources that there are. That's where you start to get the unlock. And this is the time to get the bedrock right.
Yep.
This is the time. You're not going to suddenly shift your eating habits when you're 6 weeks out of a race and you're thinking about this. I think this is the great time for habit development.
Yeah. And I mean, what I really want to stress here as well, there is not this notion of clean eating versus dirty eating. And Jan and I have had many conversations around this, like what is clean eating? And he certainly is on that side of the spectrum that is very focused on clean eating. And yes, I believe in good quality food. It doesn't mean you need to exclude other foods at the expense of calories, if calories are required. However, if we think back to the carbohydrate conversation around how much carbohydrates do a lot of athletes need, then it's similar to total calories for how much do a lot of athletes need as well in day-to-day setting. If you're doing 20 plus hours, probably even over 15 hours, yes, your caloric requirement's going to be much higher.
Considerable, yeah.
If you are pretty typical, like, I don't know, about 15 hours is a lot of training for me with a full-time job. I don't get anywhere near that these days. No. Like time starved, somewhere between 6 and 10 hours.
Exactly.
It is actually interesting, like your energy intake can be majority of the time accomplished with really great quality fruit, vegetables, good quality proteins, fats and whatnot. Now, in-session fueling, don't neglect it.
Exactly.
And yes, there is this separation, but there's also this
layering
realization that it's okay to eat gels, carbohydrate drinks, whatnot, high glycemic, processed, ultra processed carbohydrates in sessions that require it.
Exactly.
You can eat all the vegetables and fruits in the world, but if you then don't fuel those sessions correctly, you're going to come unstuck eventually. You'll last for a while, and then people might be going, oh, you look amazing, because maybe you are stripping down fat, but it will bite you in the bum eventually. And so fuel those sessions correctly based on the intensity of the duration. Fuel outside of that with total calories, your macronutrient breakdown like we've described, with those foundational sort of elements to it. And when you combine those, that's when you see results. And I think whether you're in off season pre-season or season, it's just refocusing. It's just changing your focus to what you're trying to achieve. And that's, again, coming full circle in this conversation. It's like nutrition is so central to everything that you're trying to achieve. So don't neglect it just because you don't have a race.
Yep.
Just because you don't have a race does not mean nutrition is now not a focus. Yes, you can pull back. You don't need to track everything super hard, but at least have a structure, because that structure means that you don't have to think so much.
Exactly.
And it just allows you to get on with the fun stuff: training, sleeping well, and eating well.
So I want to broaden our horizon. I want to talk, and this still sweeps up a lot of athletes, but it's not athlete specific. Folks that are looking to improve body composition. You talked about a bedrock of great eating habits. Shift the conversation a little bit. You don't need to retread over a ground that you've already trodden over in the front part of the show. You talked about fiber, vegetables, proteins. What about any considerations for someone, athlete or otherwise, by the way, the key considerations and perhaps some of the pitfalls to avoid if the goal, the mission is to improve body composition? What's some of your general advice for folks that are looking to actually improve their body composition?
I think sleep's a big one. And I know that's sort of, sleep's always one of those interesting ones with nutrition. Is it nutrition? Not really, but it has such a strong relationship, as I've described before, with nutrition, that I think what we're seeing with the research as well, if you have limited amount of sleep, it will make you or force your brain to think about hedonistic choices, salty and sweet. So I think sleep is one of those unrecognized, like, key elements. If you and it seems to have an impact on modulation or prioritization of fat as a fuel source versus, say, carbohydrates as well. So if you want to try and improve the ability to use fat as a fuel source, then potentially sleep could be one of those key elements to think about. So I think sleep and time in bed is not sleep.
Yep.
Okay, so for everyone tracking either with an Oura ring, a Whoop, or a watch, I would, suggest that look at your time in bed and at least minus 1 hour from that.
That's the typical.
That's an easy sort of thing. Okay, I'm in bed for 9 hours. Okay, you get 8 hours sleep. Time, you could talk about the synchronization of circadian rhythm and things like that and stages, but I think at least as a habit to start with time asleep.
Yep.
And even if you don't track, just use that general rule of thumb.
It's without going down a rabbit hole. And
I love it. I always take you down.
No, I'm not going to. You don't need to talk about it, but it is really a key consideration for a woman in perimenopause who, because of a host of reasons, has a really hard time getting really good sleep quality, and often is sitting with the body unable to get into a parasympathetic state. In other words, a really rested state. And I think that has a correlation to a lot of the challenges around body composition as well, like just that connection of body and sleep is just constantly in a high stress environment.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of the research on that, so I'm not going to comment on it. But we can talk about perimenopause and menopausal women. So something about body composition. What we have seen in the research, and there's a cool study that came out of Sydney University, which looked at the reason, and again, I hear this from menopausal women a lot. Oh, I can't lose weight. I can't shift body fat. Look at your protein intake.
Yeah.
Now, and it seems obvious, the study came out that when menopausal women did not hit their high protein intake, and I think it was over 1.8 grams per kilo body weight, so high again in that recommendation where we push it.
Which is about 1 gram per pound.
So at least, look, again, that's simple. Think of whatever you weigh in pounds trying to eat. That's somewhere between that 2 and 3 grams per kilo body weight, which is what we push at Fuelin. If they don't hit that, what happens is, they will choose or reach for fat or carbohydrate sources of food. Now you think, well, what else are they going to reach for? Okay, makes sense. However, fat, calorie dense, the most calorie dense macronutrient. So instantly, if you overconsume or eat too much of that fatty food, calorie intake goes up. Carbohydrates, super easy to overconsume total quantity of carbohydrates. So again, total calorie intake goes up. So it's nothing magic about this. Again, it comes down to calories. when you neglect protein, okay, again, it probably keeps you feeling fuller, but it has some other impact on, say, the thermic effect of food and slight bumps in metabolism and whatnot. But if you don't hit that,
there's a cascading impact.
from a practical element, and it's like I had to read the study about 4 or 5 times to get what they were saying. But it's that practical element. You just over consume fatty and carbohydrate food types, which pushes total calorie intake up.
Yeah.
Now, does that apply to perimenopausal young females? Probably. Does it apply to young males and older males? Probably. So just think about that.
The bedrock, I guess the one thing is body composition is a goal.
Eat your protein.
Eat with protein. That's the bedrock. And your fiber and your vegetables.
And what does fiber do?
Yep.
Fiber fills you up.
Yeah.
And again, are you hitting that 40, 45 grams of fiber intake per day? Hell no.
Hell no.
Now,
most people aren't.
Am I going to recommend that you go from 10 to 15 grams of fiber to 45 grams of fiber a day? No, because you're going to feel very full of something.
Yeah.
Build it up. A bit like carbohydrate intake on the bike or the run.
Yeah,
build it up. Layer it in. So I say from a body composition standpoint, yes, protein, we talk about a lot. It is super important, I think, from that perspective.
Well, what about dehydration? Because a lot of folks walk around like dried sponges, and one of the symptoms of dehydration is hunger. And so that must have an impact as well. Because on daily life, most people, forget about training. We're not talking about athletes here. Most people do not consume. We just came back from a workshop and working with a leadership team. So these are high performers in life. And across the 12 people we're working with, the average daily consumption of fluids that they were self-reflecting on in the weeks in tracking in the couple of weeks leading in was about half a litre to a litre a day. Just not enough water.
Especially if you're stuck indoors in air conditioning and things like that, you might be losing a lot more fluid than what you think about. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We have reminders in Fuelin for hydrate, and some people are like, oh, I don't want that reminder in there. And we were thinking of making it optional, but actually we're going to keep it in as a mandatory just reminder, because it does actually, well, I shouldn't say actually, it does remind you, oh, actually, I haven't drunk any, and I'm thinking to myself now, I've had 2 coffees and not 1 drop of water.
Well, we're sitting here without any water on the table,
and I've been for a run this morning.
Yeah, there you
go.
So
I'm like, I am actually
I'm right
parched.
there with you. Yeah.
So I think fluid intake, and as you mentioned, if you are dehydrated, that could mimic hunger. So you go and drink a litre or half a litre of fluid, and suddenly you're like, actually, I'm not that hungry anymore. Now, could it be boredom? The other thing to think about from body composition, you're sitting down all day, you're in front of the computer. Oh, there's a packet of chips or crisps next to you. What do? You eat it because you're bored. And it's that bored hunger. Get up, go for a walk, do some air squats, do some push-ups, something like that. Suddenly you're like, oh, maybe I'm not. So I think there's a big psychological element to this as well.
There's another impact on body composition for folks that are amateur athletes, I believe, where NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. We went through with this leadership group as well, and we tracked and we looked at the 5 folks that were consistently training to some level. And so there was one person that was really into group fitness. Okay, they did something every day. Someone else, a couple of folks that happened to be triathletes, etc. But their average steps per day, outside of their 1 hour of exercise that they typically did per day, was incredibly low. So they drove to the office, they walked to the office, they sat in the office, they're not burning any calories, they're not moving around. It was unbelievable. It was 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day. Then they would go and exercise an hour on the trainer. I think that's a factor of, particularly in America, I would say, with the infrastructure, all the cities here are not set up for walking, et cetera, et cetera. That's probably another component when you think about body composition. It's just increasing your daily movement.
Yeah, and I think separating out exercise from activity.
Yeah, exactly.
That is something that I tend to, if I'm coaching an athlete, is talking about that. Don't just, you can do 45 minutes group exercise and then sit on the couch or at your desk for the rest of the day. And again, working from home in post-COVID, you get up from the bed, you walk to the shower, you walk to the kitchen, you walk to your breakfast table. you sit on the couch, but all up, you could look at your watch at the end of the day and go, oh, 1,500 steps.
Exactly.
That's not enough activity. Even with a 45-minute exercise session, your actual total, again, estimated, and again, you can take pinch of salt with any estimation, is that, it might only be 1,800 calories for the entire day. But because you've sat in your house, you've got all these snacks around you, you sit at your desk eating that, you have your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, you have a few snacks. Before you know it, you've consumed 2,500, 3,000 calories. And you wonder why, despite exercising every day, things aren't going the way you want. So probably my take home for body composition is perception versus reality. Now, if you're struggling from a body composition perspective, track.
Exactly.
Do yourself a favor. And
Not
I know
for the rest of your life.
I know, and there will be the kickback. Oh, you don't need to track. No, actually account for what goes in your mouth, at least for several weeks, and be meticulous about how you're actually tracking that. And then you will start to realize, oh my God, 4 tablespoons of peanut butter on my toast in the morning, maybe I don't need that. Maybe I don't need half an avocado on my salad. Maybe I don't need that. Again, portion control is really important. And yes, there can be that argument that tracking can create all sorts of negative habits, and I don't disagree. However, it can also give great insight to an individual about what they're doing on a daily basis. And I think, again, when it's managed and used correctly,
Then
it
it can be empowering.
can be completely empowering. And then, as we described, you can use other strategies, visualization techniques as you get better. Like, I don't have to track every day. I can look at my plate and go, okay, I've got enough veggies, I've got enough fruit, I've eaten this in a day, I understand the amount of protein. Around racing, okay, I've got a specific purpose now. So it's horses for courses. If your focus is body composition, then dial it in until you get to the point where you're very, very comfortable and you are where you are from a health perspective. Again, improvement in body composition is not just losing weight. It's increasing or maintaining lean mass as you reduce body fat, visceral
Key
fat.
component.
That's a key component. I know we've talked about Ozempic, stuff like that in the past, and we won't go down that rabbit hole. I did write an article about this, which was recent, and Jan and I talked about it, I think Ozempic is fascinating. However, the potential drawbacks on it is, yes, you lose rapid amounts of weight in the form of fat, but also at the cost of lean mass. Now, what does that do as you come off Ozempic and potentially go back up in weight, but that weight is gained in fat, but you've lost huge amounts of muscle? That's where potential issues could come out in the long term. So I think it's a space to watch. And again, it's a rabbit hole.
I'll give you my 1 minute perspective and we'll wrap up, which is it's fascinating. And the next 10 years, it's the first time in decades that obesity has gone down in America, mostly related to the GLP or Ozempic family of drugs. There's all sorts of interesting stuff emerging, and we don't just talk about it of what it's doing with clarity and cognitive function, and is there anything there? Okay, I don't know.
In terms of negative?
In terms of positive. Actually, like they're starting to think that they understand. We don't understand the long-term potential risks of it. It's really interesting of this balance between long-term health risks and long-term benefits when you're talking about a total population that is 50% overweight or obese, and
well beyond 50%.
Well beyond 50%, and 93% are metabolically unhealthy.
Correct.
The biggest catalyst for anyone that is, I guess, the only recommendation I would have if anyone who's considering this is, like anything else, if you only think about it as the drug as a catalyst for change, and then you are likely going down a cul-de-sac. It is a tool that for some people might theoretically be useful, but it needs to come in, and this is one of the frustrations, it needs to come in conjunction with serious habit change around a lot of what we talked about: nutritional habits, exercise, movement and daily activity, sleep, etc. And then for some people, there might be a case.
Well, you look at
So-
the guidelines for it, it's meant to be done in conjunction with
That's what it is.
lifestyle
It's
intervention,
not
but
a
no
weight
one's
lo-
doing
It's
that.
not a weight loss drug.
And I mean, you talk about those interventions, that has to be what you eat on a daily basis, like,
Yeah.
and building those, everything we talked about, weights training. Like, my personal view is cardio is out the window.
Yep.
At that point in time, when you're on that drug, you are lifting heavy, repetitive weights 3 to 4 times a week to try and retain or maintain or increase potentially lean mass. High protein intake to try and offset any losses in lean mass
With you all the
that are
way.
occurring. And
Strength first.
you are going to come off this drug at some point because
Yeah.
A, it's expensive, but B, you probably, once you hit your goal, then you come off
You'd have
it.
been any drug for life, hopefully.
Now, hopefully, like most dieting, programs and that, if you don't have the habits built in, lo and behold, you yo-yo, you bounce back, and it could be disaster.
With negative consequences, as you said, because you might have lost lean body
So
mass.
much mass. So again, I'm not an expert in GLP-1s. It's fascinating to read about. It's interesting to comment on, and I think there's going to be a lot more. I mean, there seems to be a lot more. I'm seeing research paper after research paper coming out, but we don't have the longitudinal studies at this point in time.
We talked about hydration a little bit, key. We talked about protein. We talked about fiber. Is there anything else for folks that are just looking to improve?
The longevity piece. Well, so the longevity piece, I think first and foremost, things like intermittent fasting, all that. No, it's not a panacea for longevity. I think that's pretty clear. I think even some of the experts in longevity, you will have heard them. They've talked about their mistakes with intermittent fasting.
100%.
With fasting. Intermittent fasting and time-restricted fasting, it's a tool in the toolbox for those individuals. Again, most of the research is around metabolically unfit, overweight, male, female individuals, middle age, and it has some impact on those individuals. Again, it's not clear cut. The difference between intermittent fasting, time-restricted fasting, and caloric restriction, pretty much the same when it's all equated in terms of energy balance. So don't think that you have to do that to live longer. I think first and foremost, resveratrol, I was talking about this the other day, again, another, stake in its heart. It's not some magic compound that's going to make you live longer.
Yep.
Do you know what makes you live longer? Exercise. Exercise changes telomere.
It is the number one consistent thing by a country mile on terms of longevity and reduction of disease risk.
Well, you're 70, aren't you? So.
I'm 72, and I'm co-founder of the Marin chapter of AARP, and we have got a great society. It's a wonderful connection.
But you can impact. Like, I love how like Aura, Garmin, they'll all give you your age, don't they?
Yeah.
Where do you sit on that? And look, it's a made-up number metric. I'm sure they're using some algorithm to do it. But where do you actually sit? If you want to, again, if you're tracking things, what does your age actually say on that? Are you 7 years younger? Are you 8 years younger? Or actually, are you older? I read a report for a client of mine the other day. They're, based on all their heart testing and their cholesterol and their blood sugars and that, they're 10 years older than what they are. Now, again, that's a theoretical age, but
it's telling.
It's telling. So, again, look at the data with everything that because you're hell-bent on living forever, which I don't know why you'd want to do that, but look at what you're doing. Are you exercising daily? Doesn't have to be mad, but doing something. Are you exercising? Are you staying active? Are you eating those foundational principles we talked about? And are you sleeping?
That's it.
Probably the only other thing from longevity is stress. Stress management. Stress can be noxious and stress can be productive. Again, I think a lot of individuals hear the word stress and think it's bad.
Exactly.
What is exercise? Exercise is stress on the body. What does stress do? With the right amount of stress and the right nutrition, it creates adaptation in a positive way. So stress on the body, not allowing it to be too high, not allowing it to be too low, getting that balance right. Again, I can think of training peaks in particular. They do a nice little graph that shows you where your stress is and how it's relating to adaptation and where you should be going. I actually looked at it more recently. I was like, oh, that's interesting. As the build towards the marathon, I've pretty much been on point.
Mm-hmm.
Feel good. Stress gets too high, you get sick, you get injured. Stress gets too low, you detrain, you get worse in what you're trying to achieve. So I think those 4 things, that's what will make you live longer.
There you go. Great way to finish. Well done. Thank you very much, my friend.
Thanks, mate.
Great to see you, and travel back safe down under to the land of dirtiness. And we'll go from there. Thank you very much for being on the show, Scott. And thanks for listening, folks. We'll see you next time. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for joining, and thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed the new format. You can never miss an episode by simply subscribing. Head to the Purple Patch channel of YouTube, and you will find it there, and you could subscribe. Of course, I'd like to ask you, if you will subscribe, also share it with your friends, and it's really helpful if you leave a nice positive review in the comments. Now, any questions that you have, let me know. Feel free to add a comment, and I will try my best to respond and support you on your performance journey. And in fact, as we commence this video podcast experience, if you have any feedback at all, as mentioned earlier in the show, we would love your help in helping us to improve. Simply email us at info@purplepatchfitness.com or leave it in the comments of the show at the Purple Patch page, and we will get you dialed in. We'd love constructive feedback. We are in a growth mindset, as we like to call it. And so feel free to share with your friends. But as I said, let's build this together. Let's make it something special. It's really fun. We're really trying hard to make it a special experience, and we want to welcome you into the Purple Patch community. With that, I hope you have a great week. Stay healthy, have fun, keep smiling, doing whatever you do. Take care.